Hey all, I am coming to you with actually a very heavy heart because I have been struggling whether to talk about this topic or not. But I really honestly feel compelled to say something. And I don't know if what I'm going to say is something that most people haven't heard, but I'm hoping that I'm adding a little bit of value in the topic. As you know, at least 7 people died in the past week. Where 2 people were killed by police, and their names are Alton Sterling from Louisiana and Philando, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, Castile from Minnesota. And of course, the policemen that were subsequently killed in Dallas, Texas. And so, really, I don't even know where to begin because I honestly did not. I never thought I had to address this as an immigrant who is from South Africa, who grew up with police brutality. And also, I felt that I needed to address this because I have a son who happens to be black, that I had to yet sit him down and make sure that he understands what he is supposed to do, what his rights are, and what his limitations are, and really make sure that he understands that his life is more valuable than any other thing that exist in this world. And so, and he understands that protecting his life is more important than anything. Not that I'm saying that the people who were killed were in any way or shape uh, needed to die, because no one deserves to die. We all have a right to live, and that right must never be taken by anyone else. Um, uh, and our constitution grants us that. So I really felt compelled to say something, okay? And really, what really, in all this tragedy, what really upset me the most was to hear that little girl's voice when she was trying to comfort her mother, saying that, Mom, I'm here with you. Don't cry. To me, that just broke my heart, and I could not hold back because I just imagined if that was my child, and I don't think any child should ever go through something like that. But again, thankfully, children are resilient and allowed to thrive. She will hopefully get over the hurt and the psychological scars that come with the experience that she had, though there will always be her experiences. So I thought, uh, to me, that was the most hurtful thing that I saw. Not that the life of a person is not important, but I was just thinking about the psychological scars that that child will endure. So again, we already know the problem, and I don't feel that it's necessary to rehash it. We know it, but I think the biggest problem I have is every time something like this happens, we have the same response. And as you know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different result, right? So what we've been doing is basically just saying, okay, it happened, we are shocked, we are outraged, we give interviews, we march. And I know some people have tried to change legislation, but we're still here. So the question then, what do we do? How do we look past this tragedy and build really on it, rather than, or at least figure out a way to make sure that it really never happens? So for me, really, I'm more interested in that than anything, because we've been through these tragedies many times over. So the question then becomes, what do we do, right? I feel like the first thing that we need to do is correctly identify the problem, because if you do not correctly identify the problem, then you're going to always come with bad solutions for the problem, right? So we need to correctly identify the problem. The problem is clearly police brutality. In America, we have a context, and that context is a country that was built on the backs of immigrants, on the backs of slaves first, on the backs of immigrants, and racism was entrenched in our original constitution, which is why we needed to have all these amendments, because we had a process that says when things don't work, we have to change them. And so for me, really, this is the crux of the matter. We have police brutality, but what causes that? And what can we do to fix that problem? I think we first have to think about what kind of a country do we want. I don't mean, the problem in America is, in the beginning, America was built on racism. And every attempt that has been made to move America from that racism has been met with opposition, and any solution that has been brought forward, people have figured ways to always go back to racism, meaning not solve the problem, but give a perception that we are solving a problem when we're really not, right? And those tricks, and like you look, even today on the voting rights, the things that are being done, the goal is always to revert to racism. And I think if we can understand that that's a problem and be on the same page that we have a problem, then we can really come up with solutions. Not that people haven't tried, but the opposition has been, in my mind, very strong in terms of, or very smart or clever in terms of pretending that it's coming up with a solution when it's really not. And sometimes the solution is just to say, oh, we understand that there's a problem, and no one really wants to come up with a solution or a solution as to what needs to be done to solve that problem. So you get a situation where everybody, says, okay, yeah, we do have a problem, but nobody wants to come up with a solution. So correctly identifying the problem, deciding what kind of country do we want to live in. Answering the what kind of country we want to live in, I think that has been answered many times. But the one thing I would like to add to that is, we have to understand things like race, things like class, and all those things are human social construct. They are not set in stone. They are not natural order of things. They are just things that have been created by men in a quest to divide and conquer and create a space for him or herself to be greedy. And really, and if we understand that, then we understand that none of it matters. None of it matters. What matters is our human dignity as guaranteed by the US Constitution, at least for American citizens, and really around the world, because you will recognize that even things like countries and so if we understand that all these things are nothing but social constructs that are designed to divide and conquer us, and a lot of us have fallen into that trap, and we see everything through the prism of these constructs that are unnatural, that are just designed to divide us. And so then a person is going to say, but what if black people are being treated badly? Yes, they are treated badly because, again, we don't recognize their humanity. We don't recognize black people's humanity, and it is the reason we are where we are. So it's a simple thing. Just recognize someone else's humanity, have compassion, have empathy for someone else, walk in someone else's shoes, at least, so that you can understand where they are coming from. So that's number one. So what is so then I've asked myself, what else could we have done differently? If you know, like in America and in the case of South Africa, to be honest with you, when we got our freedom, maybe, like in America, when the slavery was abolished, when Jim Crow laws were abolished, there was nothing that was done really for people to understand the psychological effects of racism from the perspective of every human being. Racism affected us all. It affected Black people, it affected white people, Hispanic people, Asian people. It affects us all. And what does that mean? What that means is that it was not enough to say you are all free now, walk off. What was important that needed to be done, that could have saved us this moment, this very bad episode in the history of this country, I think would have been to say, okay, let's devise a curriculum that is first designed to educate, number one, and number two, really to teach the Constitution. A lot of our kids get out of high school without really learning about the Constitution, not who created the Constitution, because those are events, right? But what it means in their daily lives. This would solve a problem for the policeman. It will solve a problem for the average citizen, because the policeman is there to protect really the constitutional rights of other people by making sure that criminals and bad people don't go around hurting other people. They are there to really preserve law and order, as long as that law is a just law and is designed to protect everyone. I think that's the role of the police. And so the question then becomes, what do we benefit from that? What we benefit from that is, first of all, understanding the rights, our rights and our limitations when it comes to engaging. And I say engaging, I'm not saying engaging with a policeman, I'm saying engage with each other. Whether we are policemen or average citizens, we need to understand our limitations and be on the same page, what that means, right? That solves a lot of problems, because then the policeman will not overstep their bounds and the citizen will understand where they are overstepping their own bounds. So that would end a lot of things. A lot of policemen in America, I shouldn't say a lot because that will be absolutely wrong, but some policemen think that it is their job to carry out the law, not to preserve the law, but to carry out justice, which is why they end up shooting and killing a lot of people. It's because they think that they are the law, but they are protectors of law. They are not the law unto itself. That's number one. And secondly, again, if you as a policeman think that I can just go on the street and tell a citizen, like sit down, and you expect a citizen to sit down because you said so, there's a problem right there. That means you don't understand your responsibility and you don't understand what your limitations are. And I think that teaching the Constitution of the United States in a way that if someone decides to become a cop, or a child drops out of high school, because in America, you're not supposed to drop out of school until, I think, in most states, until you're 16 years old. If you do decide to drop out, you've already learned about the Constitution. Think about it. We have a generation of young people who understand the value of recycling, who understand that bullying is wrong. All those things have been taught in school, and they were taught in school over a generation, and now we have a generation of, by and large, responsible citizens. Nobody has to tell my child what's the value of recycling. He knows. And so what I'm trying to say is that we can use the school for something that will be beneficial to the entire society. And also, another thing we need to teach is logic. We need to teach logic, people. The value there is that you can see through the BS. You can see through when someone is telling you that this is what we are discussing, meaning they will take and paint all policemen with a brush in hopes that they're gonna paint you as someone who's anti-police. You can see through that BS, because you can say, hey, you are building a straw man here that you're trying to attack. So teaching logic is a valuable tool in a responsible citizenry, in creating a responsible citizenry. But at least we can spot a BS when someone is BSing. We can know that this is not what we're talking about here. We are talking about police brutality, and some police have acted in a bad manner, and that's what we are admonishing here. We're not disparaging all policemen. So I think teaching logic is definitely important. Also, teaching psychological effects of racism, what I call a curriculum to de-racialize the mind. What I mean by that is, it's not only black people who are affected, or Latinos, or Hispanics, or Asians who are affected by racism. We are all affected. So we need a curriculum that makes a white person understand that your perspective is not enough. You have to be able to stand in a black person's perspective and understand what racism did to our society, and the same for black people. They should be able to stand in a white person's perspective and say, it affected you, it was designed to benefit you, but eventually it didn't just do that, it did a whole lot of damage. And I understand, because we used to say that actually during at the end of apartheid, that racism did not just affect black people, it affected white people, how they see a black person. How they see a black person, the kind of conclusions they draw when they see a black person, or how they think about black people, that is all because of racism. And so if we don't make a concerted effort in teaching about the psychological, we teach about black history. That's not what I'm talking about here. Those are events, okay? Those are facts, like we know slavery was abolished. We know there was a war. We know all those things. We know that there were Jim Crow laws. But what we don't really teach our children, so that the next generation understand that, to see things from many perspectives, because that's really how you create logical people who have an ability to come up with real solutions, and they can sit down in a table, black, white, yellow, whatever, and be able to look at the problem and see it for what it is, rather than, I as a white person, I had nothing to do with what's going on, so don't blame me. This is not about that, right? And really the goal of this was not to do that. I wanna really being able to elevate yourself above ideas, above what things mean, so that you can look at things from a detached, in a way, perspective that says that's wrong. And I'm not saying that there aren't people who are doing that. There are tons and tons of people who are doing that, of all races. And to me, that's ultimately what we want. But then it's not enough that we just look at the problem. We also have to come up with real solutions. So that's my 2 cents, and I hope this, in a way, I don't know, I honestly don't know. I do not want my son to grow up in a society where he thinks that he's a target. I want him to be free in his thinking, in the way he views the world, and not live in fear that somebody might look at him and decide he's a criminal just because he's looking at him, or someone might be scared of him because he thinks he's a criminal. And to me, that's really the reason I did this video, because I had to talk to my son, explain to him what had happened, and made sure that he understood what what this is about, and understand that it's not about necessarily about white people, but it's about power and what that power can do to all people. Because if that power controls all of us, it can screw us all, right? And so And I'm not saying that the issue for black people is not particular. It is. Racism was about oppressing black people. And today, I believe, is the reason why we are here. I've always said in countries where they don't have race issues per se, they tend to come up with solutions that are real solutions, because they're not thinking things through the prism of race. How is this going to benefit this group of people? How is this going to benefit? We are here because of racism. We think in those terms because of racism. The question is, can we get past it? And I think that if we give a generation the space and time and the right curriculum, and make sure that when they come out, they are on the better side of this issue. And also for, like, everyone will be pretty much on the same page as to what this really means. So I hope this was, my 2 cents. I don't know, if I'm on the right track, but I honestly feel that the psychological abuse of living in fear is the worst kind of psychological abuse. And I don't want myself or someone else, or someone that I love to go through something like that. And by the way, I've experienced, which I forgot to say in the beginning, I've experienced police roughness, I would say. I don't even know what the word, because what happened was I was stopped for a traffic stop, and I was getting into my at my work's garage, and I had just pulled in, and then and we had to go through a like the gate, the lever that goes up when you put your card. So the police couldn't come in. The policewoman could not come in, and she just stopped right at the gate, and she walked out of her vehicle. I didn't even see her, because I was thinking to myself, I was thinking there's no, I didn't even think I was speeding, to be honest with you, because there were cars that were going straight. I was turning into our garage. So I figured, if he was gonna pull anyone, those would be the people who were going straight, because they were driving at a high speed. But ultimately, she pulls into our garage, and so I'm about to open the door, because I just arrived in our garage, and she comes right behind my car with her gun drawn, and she says, "Sit down, sit down." And I'm thinking to myself, I'm confused, because I don't know what's going on, right? And she says, never open your car when a police person stops you. And I'm thinking to myself, what did I do? And she said, you were speeding. I was like, what? And she said, yeah, you were speeding. And I'm thinking to myself, what the, I wasn't speeding, because I was coming to the garage. He probably picked up a car that was going straight, but she decided that, she was going to follow me. But anyway, so she followed me. So she gave me a ticket, and I went into the office really confused, thinking to myself, there's no way I was speeding. No way I was speeding. But here in the United States, if it's your word against the police, you really have you have no recourse, because the word of the police will always be above that of a citizen. And I think that also needs to change, because it angers a lot of people who have respect for the system. But when you feel like the system is being abused against you, then that could lead to all sorts of bad outcomes, right? Because we need to have trust, we need to trust the system. It should be an honorable system, and that's really my concern with that. And again, one time I was driving, and again another policeman pulls up, right? And as he's coming, I think I was sitting on the passenger seat and my husband was driving. And as he's pulling up, he sees my husband, who's a lot darker. Not dark, but he's more brown than anything. And he sees my husband, and he comes already with his hand on his gun. It's almost like he's afraid and paranoid. And I think that's what I mean by the psychological effects of racism. People are paranoid, or they look at you through the prism of, there's going to be a conflict here and I better be ready. And if you approach things that way, really you can only escalate, right? You can only escalate. And I understand the policemen have a very difficult job to do and they have to be ready. But at the same time, a lot of times we as Black people feel like the police do not respect us. They expect us to bow and act like we are sub-citizens rather than the full citizens of this country. And that creates a problem over time. So thank you. I'm sorry I went on too long, but this is something that bothers me personally, as I said, as someone who grew up with that kind of brutality, and I do not expect it in this country. And it's been a huge disappointment in a way, but at the same time I understand the greatness of this country, what makes America work, and I'm grateful, like, for the opportunities this country has afforded me. And I understand that for people outside of the United States, it seems really bad. But bear in mind that there's 315 million Americans, and at any given time, there's almost like 400 million people in this country, and it's a vast country, at least 3 times the size of South Africa. So when things happen, we hear them on TV. For some of us, I shouldn't say that really, but ultimately you have a huge country here. And so it's important that when things are beamed around the world, people get a real idea of what's going on rather than, like the sensation of it, and at least put things into the right perspective. And the right, I shouldn't even say that because I don't want to give the impression that I care more about perception than reality. But the point I'm trying to make is that if we understand really the magnitude of what we are dealing with here, then we cannot draw the wrong conclusions about the country. But we should always be outraged when a human being is killed, no matter where. We should always be outraged, whether it's 1 or 1,000. We should always be outraged, because if we're outraged by 1, we'll most likely prevent 1,000 from dying. So the point I'm trying to make is that we should always recognize our humanity. Ubuntu betu. Our humanity is all we have. Everything else is immaterial. Thank you.